Hello and welcome to this new video. Today I will show you why the ancient Egyptians and most likely many other advanced ancient civilizations did not carve their gigantic megalithic stone blocks but cast them. In this video, we will explore how geopolymer granite can be produced using simple technology that were available to the ancient Egyptians. We will also explain why we find these mysterious protruding nubs on megalithic stone structures all around the world and why the only explanation that makes sense is that they cast the blocks. And today you will learn how all of this fits together into one theory that actually makes sense. So grab a drink, sit back and enjoy this video. In my first video on geopolymers, we already examined how Professor Davidovits and his team in France conducted the famous geopolymer experiment. We also looked at a video by Marcell Fóti where he demonstrated how granite can be dissolved in something as simple as a cooking pot, using methods that were theoretically available to the ancient Egyptians. And since then, a lot has happened. Marcell Fóti has released a new and brilliant video on his X account, and the fascinating part is that anyone can replicate this experiment at home using ingredients that were readily available in ancient times. So in this video we will go through this experiment by Marcell Fóti step by step, and then we will look deeper into how the ancient Egyptians may have done this on a massive scale and how they were able to pour granite blocks. And by the end of the video, you will probably agree with me that this makes a lot of sense. Here I also want to say a huge thank you to Marcell Fóti personally. We will also link his book again here in the description. I highly recommend this book. If you're interested, please use the link. This supports our channel and for you there is no extra cost involved. So now let's take a look at this new video from Marcell Fóti, and after that we will examine in detail how the ancient Egyptians might have used this technology. Let's go!
Casting Artificial Granite version 3.0, the ancient way. Before we begin, let go of everything in your head that belongs to the 21st century. We have no cement mixer, no drill mixer bit, no vibration tool to shake out bubbles, and so on. Oh, and we don't have a scale either. From this point on, we are cavemen. Pay close attention to what I'm not doing, and don't do those things either, because they're pointless and harmful. We're going to cast a quote-unquote huge stone inside a plastic cup. The ingredients are water glass, sand, or any other type of crushed stone like granite, and a pinch of slaked lime used only as a catalyst. The spirit test. If your water glass doesn't start to gel from a sip of whiskey or other strong spirit, stop right there. You won't be able to make stone with it. For beginners, I recommend measuring out, say, 100 grams of sand or granite grit and 2 grams of slaked lime so you can keep the 2% ratio. I don't use a scale anymore, and I'll show you why. Here are 2 piles of 100 grams of silica sand, and in the smaller back cups, 1 to 1 gram of slaked lime. I'm not touching the sand on the left, it's only there for comparison. But look at what happens when I mix the first gram of lime into the sand on the right, and then the second one. This 2% catalyst visibly stains the sand, turning it white. That's why I don't use a scale anymore. I add slaked lime until it clearly changes the color. That's roughly 2%. I'll show the same with this horribly colored ground granite. Yeah, it's not Aswan granite, sadly, but at least I can get it. The lime visibly lightens this too. Now, for the basalt flour. This one's tricky. It didn't change color at all. That's because it's a 21st century ultrafine powder. The 2 grams of lime simply disappear in it. We'll see later how this modern wonder behaves. The fourth contender is this nice lemon yellow desert sand I bought at a pet store. It's usually used in terrariums under reptiles, but we're going to cast stone from it. And yes, the 2% lime turns this beautifully white as well. So here are the 4 candidates for stone casting: silica sand, granite grit, basalt powder, and desert sand. In the next step, we're not measuring out the water glass. Remember, we don't have a scale. Instead, grab your mold, which in my case is a plastic pudding cup, and pour in about 1 centimeter of water glass. It must be undiluted. In fact, I usually boil mine down to make it even thicker. Into this roughly 1 centimeter layer of water glass, I start spooning in the dry, catalyzed mix. Watch how it clumps instantly. That's caused by sudden surface dehydration and gelling. Our job is to break up those clumps. If it were a large stone, we'd stomp them apart. It's crucial that all this is done below the surface of the liquid. That's the secret to producing a bubble-free stone. Just like natural rock, working underwater forces the bubbles upward to escape. So all I do is spoon it in, then crush the clumps. I repeat this as long as I can work under the liquid level. Once I can't, I pour in more water glass and continue. See? I'm not mixing it at all. Mixing bunches up the slaked lime, forming white lumps that separate out, and that ruins the whole act. When the submerged fill reaches the height of the neighboring stone in the quote-unquote wall, we stop. Now what? What do we do with the excess water glass? We can't tip a 10-ton stone out of the wall to pour it off, obviously. And we're not going to cheat with the plastic cup either. So we come up with a brilliant idea. Poke a hole somewhere low on the mold and trust that the liquid doesn't need instructions. It'll simply flow out. On real ancient stones, those nubs may have been shaped so the liquid could drip off into a bucket instead of running down the wall. After all, it's still water glass, perfect for the next stone mold. As you can see, with this technique, the nubs are basically optional. Either I fill the water glass all the way or I drain the excess. That's why this Inca wall doesn't scare me either. Some spots have nubs, others don't. Now I'll repeat the process with the other 3 candidates. Here's the granite. Here's the basalt. And finally, the desert sand. 4 days later, they had shrunk enough to pop right out of the plastic cups. They turned out gorgeous. During the first few days, the material is still easy to carve. I hollowed out the granite-style cast with a teaspoon. The basalt one came out low quality, but that was expected. The desert sand version, though, is awesome. In the first few days, you can even cut the material with a knife. Which reminds me of that sarcophagus. Can you imagine this on a massive scale? I definitely can. Cast a stone of your own, and you'll see the ancient world differently forever. So how exactly did the Incas haul that enormous solid stone up to the top of Machu Picchu? You already know the answer. In buckets.
Okay, that's really a very interesting experiment. That certainly explains a lot. And when I saw this, suddenly so many things made sense in my head. And some of you might be wondering, what exactly is water glass and where did the ancient Egyptians get it from? And to understand that, we will take a closer look at Marcell Fóti's website, natrontheory.com. And here he explains this very well. The natron theory states that once upon a time there was a desert, and in this desert, where logically nothing should happen, humanity made its most important developmental steps. Natron is a kind of salt which was abundant in the Nile Valley. People have been handpicking and collecting it in baskets since ancient times. Ancient Egyptians used natron for at least 10 different purposes, such as washing cloth, drying food, medical treatment, mouthwashing, ceramics, textile dyeing, insecticides, conserving papyrus, cosmetics, and of course mummification. Natron was also used to create glass, so-called natron glass, which is still the most common type of glass we still use today. Between 5000 and 4000 BC, they already created small glass amulets and glass beads. What is glass and why is it important? Natron glass is nothing more than natron, sand and limestone cooked together at 850 degrees Celsius. Which means the ancient Egyptians were definitely able to melt natron since the beginning of time. Okay, then comes here the granite mistake. Granite, which has a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale, is so hard that no acid or alkali can harm it. Our ancestors had to use copper chisels and stone tools to carve granite. This is wrong. Many different chemicals can damage granite, and among them there is also one acid. Hydrofluoric acid is nearly impossible to store because it corrodes everything.
You see, hydrofluoric acid won't eat through plastic. It will, however, dissolve metal, rock, glass, ceramic. So there's that.
So we don't believe our ancestors were able to handle this substance. However, there is another substance mentioned before, which is sodium carbonate, also known as natron, in short Na2CO3, a white powder which when heated to 851 degrees Celsius eats granite for breakfast. Here you can see a photo how red granite looks after a bath in molten natron. How is etching granite possible? Granite is a complex material with 70 to 77% of it being SiO2 in different forms like quartz, feldspar and mica. Molten natron breaks down the quartz and so granite as well. What is molten natron? Molten natron is a liquid. At 851 degrees Celsius, it turns into a glowing, corrosive, reddish liquid from its fine white powder form. And in this video, you don't see yet how the natron etches the stone, because the heat dissipates immediately into the air. So what is the solution? The solution could be something like a grill chimney, as you can see here. And additionally, you'll need some kind of container to put your stone and the natron in. This setup retains the necessary heat for the natron to stay molten and do its work. And no, this is not how the ancient Egyptians did it. What is also very interesting, molten natron also etches all other volcanic rocks that have a high quartz content. This means that if you can work on granite with molten natron, you can definitely work also on other volcanic rocks that have a high quartz content, such as sandstone, quartzite, basalt, and even diorite. And this is a very interesting detail because especially the diorite is always mentioned as the stone that the ancient Egyptians used to carve the granite or the quartzite, because diorite is even harder. And many people are logically asking, okay, but then how did they carve these beautiful diorite statues? And yeah, the answer could be again, maybe they did not carve them, because if we assume that the ancient Egyptians knew how to work with molten natron, then even diorite doesn't impose a bigger difficulty than granite or any other stone. Okay, let's continue. The scoop marks mystery. The unfinished obelisk is a massive 40 meters long 1,100 ton granite block whose carvings was inexplicably halted by our ancestors. This has provided a great opportunity for us to examine how they worked. It's certain that they did not do it the way a modern person would do it. There are all sorts of strange processing marks around the obelisk. And of course we can also find there the famous diorite pounding stones that I mentioned before. I also took one of these pounding stones to try and carve the granite, and you can see it here. It's a joke. And they're really heavy. You have to be really strong to do anything with it. They're really super heavy, these diorite stones, much harder than any stone that I held before. And yeah, what's wrong with this explanation? This explanation has several issues. Not only is it incredibly difficult to do that, but in some places, like under the obelisk itself, it's downright impossible. And secondly, it's entirely illogical to create these nearly perfect square-shaped depressions on the obelisk or these scoop marks when you could make significantly more progress by just knocking off these edges and to continue carving. So this makes actually no sense at all to create these strange scoop marks or these square-shaped depressions. Okay, but what does the natron theory actually suggest? The natron theory suggests that our ancestors were not foolish. They wouldn't start carving the granite with pounding stones if they knew that using molten natron made the work much easier. Once they had worked the surface with natron, carving became a child's play. They could definitely have used their pounding stones after etching the surface. In fact, that would have been a completely logical step because they had to crush and remove the residue before a second round of etching. Yeah, you can see here in this photo, from this etching process with the molten natron, you have this yellowish residue on the stone, which they would have had to remove by using these pounding stones, for example. And one explanation, by the way, why we don't see this residue today is because this residue is much softer than the stone itself, and it could have been gone only from the natural corrosion or erosion from the wind or the water over the years and the millennia. So what were these scoop marks or these square-shaped depressions on the obelisk actually used for? According to the natron theory, these depressions served the purpose of melting natron on the surface of the granite, since molten natron is a liquid and the edges were necessary to prevent it from spreading all over the area. But now you will ask, how did they heat the granite surface? The challenge in heating the granite surface is that the heat dissipates into the air. So how did the ancient Egyptians solve this problem? And this is really brilliant. There is actually a mural painting inside the tomb of Rekhmire. And according to Egyptologists, this wall painting shows the production of metals. Yeah, this shows the smelting of metal. But if you spend some time analyzing these pictures, you realize that this is actually the dumbest way of doing any metal work. And let's see what these guys are actually doing here. Let's start with the upper left part. Here, two people are clearly sharpening fire with some tool. The problem with this is that the floor, like any other large stone surface, almost sucks the heat out from underneath the tool. Not only is there a problem with what these good people will do if the metal accidentally melts on the floor, but also with the fact that they're deliberately making the work process more difficult by doing it on a challenging surface, reducing their chances of success. And also nothing in this painting looks like metal or metal ore. And the tool at their feet is fairly easy to identify. It's a bellows equipped with strings. And the strings were used because prior to the discovery of iron, there were no springs. So instead of springs, Strings are used to reset the bellows to their original position after being stepped on. So most likely this pile that these men are heating on the floor, it's natron. They are using molten natron to etch the granite floor. Unfortunately, there is no more evidence for this because there is no written description coming with this wall painting. But if we assume that this is just a story, I think it's a much more credible story that they were actually heating the floor or the stone floor instead of producing metal. And if this story alone isn't convincing enough, let's look at it from another perspective. The natron theory suggests that at the site of the unfinished obelisk and in various other places around the world where we find these scoop marks, such as Stonehenge or Peru, Sardinia, and so on, the primary goal wasn't actually carving the stone. Carving the stone was just a secondary aspect. The real activity in all of these locations was the production of water glass. And the end product was not the obelisk, but the water glass. Let's recap what we know so far. Molten natron etches quartz and consequently granite. Etching granite produces water glass. Okay, but now you will ask, what the heck is water glass? This substance is again a white powder with the chemical formula Na2SiO3, and it is produced when natron breaks down the quartz in the stone. It extracts the silicon from the stone and assimilates it. You can say it eats quartz for breakfast while it belches out CO2. What are the properties of water glass? Dried water glass slowly dissolves in water, where it breaks down into sodium ions and silicate ions. In this form, it serves as an excellent paper adhesive. But if it encounters metal oxides, it shows its real strength. If we look more closely at what else water glass is good for, we quickly realize its real potential. We have only known since the 1970s that water glass can be used to create a substance similar to but harder than concrete, and that doesn't require cement. Moreover, this material can be successfully used in 3D printers, allowing us to print entire houses with it. The collective name for these materials is geopolymer. If we look at ancient stone structures, we can find a million examples where our ancestors somehow softened the stones and worked with them like children play with clay. They bent the stones, pressed their hands into them, carved them with knives or even with their bare hands. And what a surprise! This is exactly how you can work with water glass based artificial stones, the geopolymers. After mixing, they are just like Play-Doh. A couple of hours later they start to harden, but you can still cut them with a knife. And only after a day they become hard as rock. Here you can see some geopolymer stones. He cast a coin into the stone like an Excalibur. So do we have any proof of ancient water glass use? Returning to the original mural from the tomb of Rekmire, we can see a white pile of something accumulating in the background. And that something is contaminated with black spots. Of course, it is contaminated because it is mixed with the remaining charcoal. And then we can actually see that this white substance is carried around in bags, poured out, and someone molds a wall out of it. And again, according to Egyptologists, this is showing the production of metal. Every ancient civilization with access to natron or similar alkali material like wood ash knew how to make water glass. We see evidence of this everywhere in the form of scoop marks. And undoubtedly, they had access to wood ash. The question is whether they tried to mix the two. If they did, they could have created artificial stone. Let's recap what we know so far. Molten natron etches quartz and consequently granite. Etching granite produces water glass. Water glass is the main component of geopolymers. So in the previous step, we created truly beautiful artificial stones using nothing but ancient materials. But yeah, without this one secret ingredient, all the stones that we would create would turn out to be gray or even black. But as we know, ancient Egyptian stone objects, they come in every possible color and type. And you can clearly see the grains of the rock in the ancient Egyptian monuments. So we need some kind of transparent additive, which is not wood ash, because the wood ash will cause the gray or dark color. And the ingredient can't be white either, because that would tint the stone white. So what could this be? Water glass is alkaline. If you add any kind of acid to water glass, it precipitates silica gel, a completely transparent glue that hardens into stone when exposed to air. It could be an ideal binder for creating artificial stone. But no matter what acid I tried, hydrochloric acid, orange juice, vinegar, and so on, the resulting stone did not resemble any natural stone. Here you can see an example. Looks beautiful, and the Nespresso capsule that has been pressed into it has its charm, but it doesn't look like real stone. So what else could be a solution? Alcohol. Alcohol also immediately precipitates the silica gel from water glass, and for a long time I thought alcohol would be the ultimate solution. Because after all, it's good for hangovers, so why wouldn't it work here? In the video, we can see how the silica gel instantly separates from the water glass when an alcoholic drink is added. However, even the alcoholic gel didn't produce a stone that resembled a natural one. So let's not beat around the bush. The secret ingredient is a base. Specifically slaked lime, but in a very small 2% dosage added as a catalyst only. In theory, this slaked lime should not work at all. It's like counterintuitive because it's alkaline and it's white, meaning it's not transparent, but by the time the material sets, it becomes clear. So yeah, that's the solution. And this is what the final result looks like. This beautifully cast stone isn't even made from granite rubble, but from plain quartz sand. The ultimate appearance of the geopolymer stone, of course, depends on the type of ground stone or sand that you use. And the end result will look exactly the same with this recipe. Yeah, because the binder material is transparent. And it is also very hard. It also ranks 6 to 6.5 on the Mohs hardness scale. And it has the same chemical composition as quartz, SiO2. Okay, but now critics will say, but where did all the crushed granite come from? And how did the Egyptians produce all the crushed granite? And I'll tell you, they did not produce any crushed granite because around Aswan, there is an entire granite desert. The sand itself is just crushed granite. It's this pink area here that you see on the map. And yeah, all the Egyptians would have needed is a shovel or a basket and a broom maybe. And what about the slaked lime? Slaked lime is a super old school material. Even cavemen were already using it. And how do we know that? Well, that's easy because anyone wrapping themselves in animal hides is actually wearing tanned leather. And one step of tanning leather is soaking the skin in lime. So yeah, they definitely had slaked lime. This is not just empty talk, this is a working recipe. And here you can see an image gallery. Dozens of volunteers from all around the world have produced beautiful geopolymer stones here. And yeah, now we come to the next point. What are megalithic nubs? This is a global phenomenon in megalithic architecture. We can see these protruding nubs from these huge stone blocks all around the world. Here is one example from Ollantaytambo in Peru. And as you can imagine, it would take a truly heroic effort to chisel off an inch of material from the entire surface of a stone just to create these strange nubs. So why did they make this, or how did they make these nubs? Let's take a look at this Roman wall here. And you can see here we also have nubs on the stone blocks. And if we assume that these nubs were actually carved, then this strange overflow that we see here on top of these blocks, then this should also have been carved, right? I think that's not the case. I think this overflow looks more like an accident. Nobody would be so foolish to carve out these nubs, and nobody would be so foolish to carve out this strange overflow at these blocks. And another common characteristic of these nubs is that they're always found at the bottom of the stone blocks. And in some rare cases, when they are not found at the bottom of the stones, then this means that the stone most likely has been rotated. And here we also have to mention that sometimes we also have nubs that actually serve a purpose or a function. Yeah, for example, for door hinges or as a support to put a wooden beam on it or something like that. So that means there are exceptions to this. But here we have a clear example of a nub that is not at the bottom of the stone, but in the center of it. And this one was definitely produced during the casting process, because notice how these stones are all very uniform in size and shape, and most likely they were all cast in molds. And at the bottom of the mold there was a hole, and that's where these nubs came out. And then they built this wall from these stones. But why? What is going on here? And to understand the true role of these nubs, we need to explore a characteristic of modern day concrete. The concrete that we use today is a hydrate. This means that water is an integral part of the concrete. It doesn't harm it, it helps it. Over time, the concrete becomes harder and harder thanks to the water in it. And this is the exact opposite of how ancient geopolymer stone works. While the water is also needed for mixing it, it becomes entirely unnecessary during the curing process itself. And so much that if it's not removed, it can actually ruin the entire stone. In fact, if there is too much water in the mix, it can turn the stone into a puddle if it's not being removed. Now, let's take a look at this video. We poured a mixture of artificial limestone into 3 different molds, and all 3 mixes were dry to the touch and hard enough to build on them initially, but then we will see what's gonna happen to them after a few hours. The first mold has a hole at the bottom, allowing the water to be released during the curing process. This mixture feels solid to the touch and remains so as it sets. The second mold has no hole at the bottom, but the top is open enough to allow for evaporation. Even so, the material begins to soften during the curing process. The third mold was completely sealed, leaving no way for the water to escape. This stone is completely ruined, has been turned into a puddle and the water is running off the top. So unlike concrete, ancient artificial stones can't be built upon at all until the excess water is drained from them. So you can say without the nubs, the construction comes to a halt. There are several ways to remove the water from the geopolymer stone, but the simplest solution to remove the excess water is a drainage hole. It doesn't matter what the formwork or the mold is made of, it could be wood or fabric, but a hole needs to be made at the bottom. And to prevent the entire liquid stone from leaking out through this hole, a piece of fabric is placed over it, allowing only the water to pass through. And then the fabric kind of bulges out, and the material behind it, of course, is the same material as the stone itself. And once it hardens and all the water has been drained, then what's left behind the fabric is this nub. Unbelievable. It's such an easy explanation, but brilliant, really. Yeah, then at the end we have here the Naxos Portara riddle. Can you figure out how this was made? Observe the position and number of the nubs on each element and try to figure out how this gate was made. Okay, let's see. Yeah, the standing parts of this gate here, the vertical long stones, they have been cast on site, let's say, in this exact position. And then they have drained the water at the bottom there from the nubs. And the top part, which is one piece, this one has been cast somewhere else, facing down. The nubs were facing down. And then once it was dry, then they placed it on top. Yeah, this is really brilliant. And with this newly acquired knowledge, we will now look at the Valley Temple of Khafre at the Giza Plateau, right next to the Sphinx, which is made up of these huge granite blocks that have these crazy polygonal shapes that interlock with each other. And here I see also many indications that this entire structure might have been cast with this geopolymer technology. It makes just so much more sense than the copper chisel theory. I mean, think about it. How could they have carved all of this? No matter if they use chisels or diorite pounding stones, but still I think carving these gigantic blocks with these complicated shapes is almost impossible to explain. And here in the Valley Temple, I would like to show you one very specific spot where I myself have stood many times and wondered how the ancient Egyptians did it and why they did it like this. And when I was browsing Marcell Fóti's X account again, my jaw really dropped because he has a great answer to many problems that we're about to see here now. So we're going to look at this specific corner here. Actually, all corners in this temple look like this. And you can see here, on one hand, we have this crazy polygonal, inexplainable shape of granite blocks that interlock through the corner. And of course, this would have been super difficult to realize if we think about carving this. And also, we can see that there is a straight edge running from the top all the way to the bottom. It almost looks like they used a gigantic sand blaster or something. And yeah, when I saw Marcell Fóti's explanation, my jaw really dropped. So I will show you this now. One particularly revealing detail is this perfectly straight, unbroken vertical line that runs along this entire corner. So what could this be? Perhaps the trace of a post that was pushed into the soft rock. So how does that work? Well, we just learned that it is indeed possible to cast granite. And we have also learned that this is possible without bubbles if it is mixed under a liquid. So if we assume that this has also happened here, then they must have worked with a waterproof mold. So let's assume they have used some kind of animal skin or leather or a waxed canvas. It doesn't matter for now what exactly they used, but if they really did it with some kind of, let's say, animal skin or something like that, then two things would have been necessary. First, the whole thing would need to be supported with boards or with wooden planks somehow, because otherwise the entire animal hide would bulge outwards and it would probably also burst. And also this animal skin or leather must be stretched very tight, because otherwise we would see imprints of wrinkles on the stone blocks. And this is exactly where these poles or posts come into play. And to illustrate this, I give you now a series of drawings here from a bird's eye perspective. Here comes Marcell Fóti's explanation. Let's take a closer look at this. And this is obviously not how it works, for several reasons, because firstly, you can't simply stretch the leather like this. And secondly, the liquid or the liquid stone would just run out between the nails. Yeah, so we need to seal it somehow. And therefore, we need another waterproof formwork, as can be seen here in the second drawing. And this here is also a animal skin or a leather or something like that, which is then stretched. And yeah, this would be a good solution to keep the liquid stone in its position and even at a 90-degree angle. But how do we actually nail this animal skin to this post? This wouldn't work like that. The liquid stone would again just run out between the nails. So where's the trick? Right here, we would have to wrap the two pieces of skin or leather around the post on top of each other and then nail them to the post. And then the whole thing would be sealed and the liquid stone would be properly contained. This looks very good. You would get a perfectly rectangular stone, but still we haven't made one of these complicated polygonal interlocking stones. And yeah, here is the solution to the problem. Again, very simple but brilliant. And then they just pour the stones on top of each other. And yeah, I think this really explains a lot. Unbelievable. A big thank you again to Marcell Fóti for this incredibly valuable work. And again, if anyone would like to order Marcell Fóti's book, The Natron Theory, please use the link in the description. And please also check out our first video about the geopolymer theory, where we show how Professor Davidovits has cast these gigantic limestone blocks that look exactly like the ones from the Pyramid of Giza. Definitely worth watching. And yeah, then I would like to talk about these scoop marks again, because during my research for one of my last videos about the gigantic quartzite sarcophagus from Abydos, I came across a quartzite quarry, which is also located in Aswan. And guess what? There is a wall at this quarry where we can also see these mysterious scoop marks. I will link the original video in the description. Unfortunately, the wall is only briefly visible in this video, but I will try to go there myself soon when I'm back in Aswan and film it properly. And yeah, these scoop marks are not only found in Egypt, but also in other places all around the world. For example, in China, in the famous Longyu caves. This is also a very mysterious facility. There are 24 man-made caves that were discovered only recently in 1992, and they have ceiling heights of up to 30 meters. And everywhere in these caves we find the same type of scoop marks on the walls, on the ceilings, on the columns, everywhere. and nobody knows exactly who built these caves or why. And most of them are still flooded to this day, and I believe only 4 or 5 are accessible, which is also a very interesting detail because that almost suggests that this might be an entrance to the underworld again, or that there might be more down there. And yeah, we are seeing the same patterns as in Egypt and in many other places around the world. And then we have also the mysterious stone jars and humanoid statues of Sulawesi in Indonesia, known by the locals as kalambas. There are hundreds of them scattered all around the island. And those stone jars and statues actually fulfill all the characteristics that we would associate with geopolymer concrete. And if you look closely at it, you'll notice that it doesn't look like classic granite or anything like that, but rather a very fine-grained, evenly structured material that has a very high quartz content. And what's also fascinating is that all the ingredients that one would theoretically need to produce geopolymer concrete also occur naturally on Sulawesi Island. Sulawesi has volcanic ashes, soils with very high aluminium silicate content, and also many different types of wood that produce very alkaline ash. And that is basically all you need to make water glass. They had also everything at their doorstep. And perhaps some of you have already noticed, many of these stone jars also have these strange scoop marks or horizontal rings on the outside. But to me, this also looks like imprints of a formwork or something like that. But this is definitely not carved. I did a 2-week expedition on Sulawesi Island to closely examine these stone jars and statues, and I will release the video soon here on our channel. And I can tell you, if you look at this with the knowledge that we have now, you get a very strong impression that this is not done with hammer and chisel. Well, it certainly looks like they poured this. And I also noticed there are many stones where the surface also looks like as if they were once soft like clay. And here I'm going to show you a few examples. It really looks like something was pressed into the stone when it was still soft. Very mysterious. The videos will be available here on the channel soon, so please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of them. I really traveled deep into the wilderness of Sulawesi, in areas with no connection to the outside world, and we've really visited some truly interesting sites that to my knowledge have never been shown on YouTube before, and it was really a truly fantastic experience. Yeah, and then another point that I came across during my research is that one of the most important differences between ancient geopolymer concrete and our modern Portland cement is modern concrete actually requires gravity to allow the water to seep in so the chemical reaction can happen and the concrete can harden. And that is precisely the reason why our modern day concrete does not work in space. Yeah, we are not able to use our concrete on the moon or on the Mars, because it simply doesn't work without gravity. And geopolymers, on the other hand, do not require gravity. They work everywhere, even on the moon. And this is actually why geopolymer can be called the concrete of the universe. It literally works everywhere. And yeah, towards the end of this video, I'd like to do some wild speculation here, because in my last video, we looked at the unfinished pyramids of Zawiet El Aryan and Abu Rawash, and while I was editing this video here, I kept on thinking about these two places, because down there in these mysterious trenches where nobody really understands what was going on there, I also see many indications that they might have used geopolymer down there also. And here I play again a short scene from the Hollywood movie The Land of the Pharaohs from the 1950s, because it shows the unfinished pyramid of Zawiat El Arian. This is the only video footage that exists of this facility. And this is truly one of the most mysterious sites in all of Egypt. After they completed this movie, it was seized by the military and they filled it up with sand and built a wall around it. And until today, no one is able to access it. And yeah, in this scene, I am seeing huge stone blocks down there that look also like concrete. And I see also different densities or different surfaces down there. You can see some blocks, they look very rough and other surfaces look very fine. And we can even see some smaller blocks down there, and there's also some joints down there. I don't really understand what we're looking at here, but maybe they were also using geopolymer. Maybe they cast all of this, who knows? If I let my imagination run wild here, it almost looks like this entire thing has been cast somehow. Very strange. But yeah, I think with this new knowledge about geopolymers, we really have to re-evaluate and look again at so many ancient structures around the world. Here I will insert another video that I recorded myself. This is the so-called unfinished pyramid of Abu Rawash, which is sometimes regarded as the smaller brother of Zawiat El Arian because they look so similar. And here I also see similar phenomenons. Do you see that? Apparently they have added some more stone masonry down there. But how exactly does that work and why did they do that? I'm still not really getting it. And they look almost like they're fused together, which is an indication for geopolymer. I don't know what we're looking at here. I don't have an explanation for that, but maybe we can decipher this here together. To me, this does not look like they simply cut this all into the rock. I have a feeling that something else has happened here. And we really have to think abstractly and on a large scale here, I think. Yeah, please write in the comments what you think about these facilities. To me, this looks very suspicious. Yeah, and then I would also like to mention again these gigantic granite cubes, which are situated beneath the step pyramid of Djoser in Saqqara and at the bottom of the gigantic shaft of the so-called southern tomb. And yeah, here we have these gigantic shafts that somehow have been cut into the rock, and at the bottom are these gigantic cubes that to me they look like a furnace or an oven or something. And somehow I have a feeling that all of this is somehow connected to this geopolymer story. And also, by the way, when we visited the southern tomb, when I went down there to examine this granite cube, I found a big chunk of glass inside the bedrock. Check out the video here, I will link it here. Yeah, and that brings us already to the end of this video. I hope I was able to deliver the natron theory of Marcell Fóti in an understandable way, and I hope you are also able to look at the ancient structures around the world from a different perspective now. And as always, thank you for watching. If you like to support our work, you can find the PayPal link in the description. Have a wonderful day and see you in the next video. Ciao!